Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Returning listeners, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So today we're going to talk about learning to increase or improve our critical thinking skills, especially in a world that tends to react to things very emotionally. And I think this is so important if you want to be successful and if you want to make good decisions and if you want to live the life that you're trying to live, you have to learn to control your emotions, apply critical thought to situations and problems, and develop good solutions to those situations and problems. Now, that does not mean that your emotions don't play a part in those decisions or how you think about those things, but it shouldn't be the overriding factor, and it shouldn't be the thing that you allow to control the decisions that you make. You want to be fact-based, evidence-based, and have a well-reasoned approach to decisions that you make for your life, especially big ones. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to give you tips. We're going to give you a framework by which and some questions you can ask yourself to help you think more critically about issues, problems, challenges, complex subjects. So that's what the episode's about today. All right? So nothing wrong with having strong emotions. We're not saying that. We're not saying that's not normal. We're not saying you're wrong for having them. But strong emotions can cloud your judgment. Critical thinking isn't about suppressing those feelings. It's about learning to pause, learning to analyze the situation, and responding with clarity and a well-reasoned approach instead of just reactivity. Okay? So think about it. You've reacted to something in the heat of the moment, only to regret it later. Right? There's always a witty remark, a sarcastic comment, a gotcha moment that you could get out when someone is speaking. We would argue that's almost never a good approach. It's almost never the way to think about it. Our suggestion is the first thing you should do is nothing. You should process what was said and be silent for somewhere between 5 to 10 seconds. Critical thinking is the ability to evaluate information and arguments objectively, especially when you're emotional. And we're big fans of critical thinking. We try to practice it as much as we can. We're not perfect. We live in a glass house. We don't throw stones. Not claiming to be awesome at this, not claiming to be the expert at this. I think I'm better at it than a lot of people, but we can all get better at it. We're going to give you that framework today, or a framework today. This is really important in a world that we live in today because it's very polarized, especially in the United States. The ability to think critically is going to set you apart from other people. And it's going to make you set you up to make better decisions. It's going to set you up to provide better guidance and leadership. And it's going to set you up for better personal growth, especially personal growth towards the things that are important to you. And that's the most important part for us, is the critical thinking allows you to be the kind of person you want to be, not be controlled by your emotions because of what other people do or say. And so that's why critical thinking is so important. So let's jump into our steps here. Let's jump into our steps that we're going to give you. Number one, we've already talked about. Pause. Stop. Pause and regulate before you judge or speak. Just stop. Just pause. Neuroscience research shows that the amygdala hijacks rational thought under stress. So when you feel a high emotion coming on, your amygdala kicks in and says, hey, this is a big deal. You need to react. Pause. Stop. Don't react. That's the best thing you can do. There's regulation techniques you can use, like breathing. We've talked about breathing exercises on this channel a lot, and there's a reason for that. It is by far, in these situations, the best and most useful and immediate action you can take that will help calm you down and let your rational brain kick back in. That re-engages the prefrontal cortex, which is where logic and reason happen. Taking deep breaths, doing box breathing, all the breathing exercises we've talked about on this channel before. We're a big fan of the cleansing breath. In deep through the nose. Hold it. Exhale it out long through the mouth, right? It's going to reset your central nervous system, let your prefrontal cortex kick back in, and then you can apply some thought to what the subject that you're looking at. So what does a bad behavior look like here? Exploding at someone because they make a comment that you disagree with or that you know is wrong. right? That's not the right approach. Better to do is pause, take a deep breath, and choose to ask some clarifying questions. Don't immediately attack. Don't immediately say you're wrong. Don't immediately go on the offensive. Instead, ask clarifying questions. We're going to give you clarifying questions further down. But like there's a 3-breath rule, right? You can use the 3-breath rule is another way to go, right? So take 3 of those deep breaths we just talked about. You don't have to be as like, let's say you're in public or in a meeting. You don't have to be as demonstrative as we just were, but you can take 3 deep breaths before you respond. People will wait. It's not going to kill anyone to wait 10 seconds. Plus, it has the added advantage of giving the perception to other people that you truly listened to what was said and you're truly thinking about your response. So it's going to be better received when you do decide to speak. What you're really doing is allowing your central nervous system to regulate and reset so that you can get out of your amygdala running your central nervous system, which is fight or flight, which is reaction, to your prefrontal cortex running your central nervous system, which is logical thought and reason. And that's where we want to be. Okay. All right. Number 2. So we've taken our deep breath. We've reset our central nervous system. Now we've got to separate emotion from evidence. This is very important. You'll hear a lot. People in the public sphere talk about things that are rightfully very emotional. There was a school shooting recently in Minnesota, and I get it. Like, this is what I always say about school shootings. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants them to stop. Nobody is arguing to allow school shootings to keep happening. Whether you're pro-gun control or anti-gun control, nobody wants that to happen. So what the argument is the best way to solve it. The problem we have is people go into ad hominem or personal attacks on people who disagree with them and call them names, say they're evil, say they don't care about people dying, none of which is true. And it's not helpful. It's not going to help us develop a solution. We need to, in those situations especially, those are life and death situations. It's very important to separate emotion from evidence. So there's been lots of studies on what's called cognitive bias, and cognitive bias is seeing only or accepting only the things that validate your viewpoint and ignoring things that run counter to your viewpoint. All right. So there was studies published by Kahneman and Tversky that show that emotions drive biased judgments if not consciously separated. So we've got to learn to separate our emotions. I'm emotional about this, but I need to look for evidence. So this happens all the time. You read a news article that confirms, say, your political leanings. Let's say you're left-wing or right-wing. Doesn't matter. It works exactly the same on both sides of the aisle. And you assume it's true because you want it to be true. It feels right. It validates what you already think. And so you accept it. Instead, why not ask, what's the source? Who wrote this? What's the data? What's the evidence to support their claims? And what would the other side argue? What would the other side say about this? Now, you still might wind up in the same spot. You still might believe exactly what you believe and say none of that disproves what I already believe to be true. But it's very important to understand the difference between evidence, facts, and opinions. Evidence are items that support but don't prove your theory. Facts are indisputable. So the thing we always use to illustrate fact is if you deconstruct a water molecule, it is always made up of 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen atoms. Always. There's never an exception to that. It's always the same thing. That is a fact. I don't agree with socialism. That's an opinion. Happens to be an opinion I hold, and there's lots of evidence to show that. There's been lots of countries that have tried socialism and things have not gone well for them over the long run. I can't think of one where it's actually worked. So there's lots of evidence, but there's no fact that says socialism is bad and evil. And people get emotional when they talk about those things. So we got to ask ourselves, what's the source? What's the data? What would the other side, what would someone who disagrees with this say? What would their arguments be? It's good to think about, really think about and consider all of those things. So the next time you see a strong claim, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it doesn't matter. You need to question the things you agree with too. You may be biased and not even know that you're being biased. Write down 3 possible alternative explanations before you form an opinion. You don't have to just accept what's presented to you. You should question it. You should look for proof. You should look for supporting evidence. And if you still wind up in the same spot, that's great. We're not saying you got to change your mind. We're saying you should rationally and logically think through things before you accept them as fact. Because like we talked about, facts are indisputable. And there's lots of ways to dispute various things, especially when you're talking about politics or emotional things. Okay? Step 3, you've got to ask better questions. Socratic questioning has been shown to reduce cognitive distortions and improve problem solving. That's from the Journal of Cognitive Therapy in 2016. An example of not doing a good job of this is accepting a statement at face value because it aligns with how you feel. You see both political parties do this all the time. They accept things on face value because it validates their pre-existing opinions or pre-existing thoughts. Instead, we need to ask better questions. What's the evidence? What's the evidence for the statement that was just made? How do they prove it? Another one, who benefits if I believe this? If someone's trying to get you to spend money, they're a lot of times going to make an emotional argument to you to try to get you to spend your money. They benefit from you believing what they're telling you. That also happens on both sides of the political aisle. What assumptions am I making? This is a very easy one to miss. We all make assumptions about things and think, because I think this way, everyone thinks this way. Or because I was raised this way, everyone was raised this way. Because I feel strongly about this, everyone feels strongly about this. That may not be true. That may be true. You should know, though. You should dig and ask questions. So, you want to practice asking those Socratic type questions. Socratic questions are open-ended questions that force you to dig deeper. For example, when you feel strongly about an issue, ask yourself, how do I know this is true? How do I know? How do I know this is factual? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And that's something I've had to learn over the years because I had very strong opinions. I always say, you should have known me when I was 20 because I was so fucking smart. When I was 20, I knew everything. You didn't have to ask me. I would just tell you how smart I was. And it turns out I've gotten a lot dumber over the years because almost nothing is for certain. Almost nothing is true. Think about all of the things that we thought were true at one point that are no longer true and in fact have been proven false. How about the food pyramid that was introduced when we were kids? 4-4-3-2, right? 4 servings of grains and then 4 servings of fruit. Like the first thing on the food pyramid is the stuff that's actually the worst for you. The high starch, high processed, high sugar stuff. That was false. We didn't question it, right? Smoking. There wasn't enough questioning of smoking back in the day. We knew it was bad for us. The cigarette companies knew it was bad for us. We didn't ask enough questions because we wanted it to be true, that it was not. So we have to learn to ask those Socratic type questions. How do I know it's true? How can you prove it's true? Who's trying to prove that it's true? And what do they stand to benefit if I believe them? What would someone who disagrees with that person say right now? Those are all great questions to ask and then answer for yourself so you can think critically about a topic. Okay? That leads us to number 4, which is seek out opposing views. And this is something that we are not doing a good job of as a society. I was involved in a little back and forth on Facebook last week around gun control. And I didn't understand. I still don't understand. The problem I have with the gun control argument is people that commit murder are already breaking the law. And I would argue they're breaking the most serious, most important law that we have. They've completely disregarded that. What law is it you're going to pass that they're going to follow? I don't understand that. Someone needs to make that make sense to me. But I want to hear from people who think gun control is a good idea or will solve our problem. I want to hear that. I genuinely want to hear their arguments. I understand in theory what they're saying. If it's harder to get guns, it's harder to commit these crimes. Maybe they would just use a knife. Maybe they would just use a car. Maybe they would just build a bomb. I don't know. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd buy the gun illegally. One thing I sure looks like the truth to me is anytime you outlaw something, you create a black market for it. It's literally how the mafia got started when we instituted prohibition in 1920. The mafia came in and said, hey, we'll sell you booze. And people said, yeah, fuck it. I want to buy booze. I don't care that I can't buy booze. So the black market opens up and that leads to crime. That leads to higher violence. That doesn't seem like a good solution to me, but I want to hear people argue that it is. I want to hear what they have to say. Maybe I'm missing something. That's okay. I've got an open mind, but I need to hear something that tells me differently. So a 2018 PNAS study found that exposure to opposing viewpoints reduces polarization and strengthens reasoning. What you'll find out is that generally the people that disagree with you are good and decent people. They just see this particular issue a little bit differently than you do. Does that mean everyone is? No, it doesn't mean everyone is. There's some scumbags out there. There's some shitty ass people out there. Totally got it. You're going to run into them every once in a while. The world isn't filled with a bunch of saints. Just how it is. I hate to break it to you. But that's okay. But generally, most people are pretty good and decent. We all want the same things. Sometimes we just disagree on how to get those things, and that's okay. But if you expose yourself to alternate viewpoints, you're going to see that about people, and you can have more reasoned, better thought out, and more rational discussions with people. So, like curating your social media feed to only include voices that confirm your worldview is a terrible idea. Don't live in an echo chamber. You're not going to learn a thing. You're not going to grow. You're not going to hear opposing viewpoints, and that's a terrible place to be. Summarily dismissing someone from your life or from your circle because they hold X, Y, or Z view. Look, if it's, I think I should be able to molest children, got it. Call the police. Get rid of that jerk. Totally got it. But it's rare that those are the instances. Usually it's, I don't agree with this political view, or I don't agree with this religious view, or whatever the case may be. That is not a reason to ostracize someone. If you are making those judgments, you need to look at yourself, because you've gone too far down that particular rabbit hole and you're not seeing the world from a clear set of eyes. You have to check yourself. Instead, you want to intentionally read, listen to, expose yourself to thoughtful perspectives with people that see things differently than you do. I don't want to use the other side or some term like that, because the reality is they just have a different viewpoint that's different than your viewpoint. And that's okay. You should learn from that. So this week, I want you to choose one credible source that challenges your beliefs. Maybe it's a person you could talk to. Maybe it's a video you can watch. Maybe it's an article you can read. Doesn't matter what it is. Don't argue. Don't try to change their mind. Don't try to win the argument. Just listen and absorb the information. Maybe you'll agree with it. Maybe you won't agree with it. But you're better off for having listened to it and understanding that perspective. That's what a critical thinker would do. And that's what we're encouraging you to do. Step 5, you want to focus on the long-term outcomes, not the short-term feelings. I totally got it. And that's what drives a lot of this immediate reaction when there's these horrible school shootings. People want to do something to make themselves feel better. I totally get that. Totally understand that. This is exactly what drove everything during COVID, is all of the fear-mongering that happened with COVID. Millions of people are going to die. I'm not convinced that the number of people that died of COVID is correct. I think many more people died with COVID, but not because of COVID, but they were counted as a COVID death simply because they had the virus somewhere in their system at the point they died. But people were afraid. And so people played on that fear and used that fear to push the agenda that they wanted to see happen. And that happened all across the spectrum. Didn't matter if you were pro-mask, anti-mask. Didn't matter if you were pro-social distancing, anti-social distancing, keeping schools open, keeping schools closed. There was not a lot of rational discourse. People immediately retreated to their camp and yelled from their camp at anyone that was outside of their camp. And that's not the way to solve the problem. And I think we're still paying the price for a lot of those decisions. You know, I think we sent a lot of people back into and trapped them in really shitty home situations when their outlet was work, or their outlet was school, or their outlet was church, or their outlet was the gym, whatever it was. I think we damaged a lot of people mentally and psychologically because we used fear to try to control their behaviors. And I don't think that's a good place for us to be. So the other thing to think about as it relates to focusing on long-term outcomes instead of short-term feelings is you're practicing delayed gratification. And there was research published by Stanford, the marshmallow experiment, where they bring a kid into a room and say, hey, there's a marshmallow on the table. You could eat it right now, but if you wait, we're not going to tell you how long you have to wait. You could have more than one marshmallow. And they did follow-up studies on those kids that showed discipline and said, hey, I don't need the marshmallow right now. I'm going to wait and get more. They wound up having more successful lives, whether that was financially, in relationships, contentedness. They had better lives long-term than the people that grabbed the marshmallow and said, fuck it, I want the marshmallow right now. Because it shows people who prioritize long-term thinking, and they tend to make better overall decisions because they're not driven by their emotions. They're thinking logically about what is the outcome I want, and am I willing to make the sacrifice to get the outcome I want? Yes, I am. They wind up with better lives. It's pretty straightforward. So if you try something new or you try something hard and it doesn't go well, don't quit. That's where most people go wrong. They just quit. You get assigned a project, you get assigned a task, you start a hobby, and it's not easy, and you quit. That is not what winners do. That is not what people who live happy, productive, successful lives do. Instead, they see each setback as a set of data or a data point and say, what can I learn from this that's going to help me move towards the larger long-term goal? Very straightforward. But it's hard to do. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. But when you're facing a decision, ask yourself, will this matter in a week, in a year, in 5 years? Let's use food as an example. Do you need Ben & Jerry's ice cream? No, you do not need Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Is it bad to have Ben & Jerry's ice cream every once in a while? No. Is it bad to have Ben & Jerry's ice cream every night? Yes. It's going to make you unhealthy. It's going to make you gain weight. It's going to increase your sugar level. It's going to increase your chance of diabetes, type 2 or type 1. There's not a lot of benefits to having it included in your diet on a regular basis. But if you say, you know what, once a month, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to allow myself to indulge. But the rest of the month, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to eat fruits and vegetables and whole foods and whole grains and stuff I know is good for me. And I'm going to control my calories. And every once in a while, I'm going to have some fun. And I'll have my favorite Ben & Jerry's or my favorite drink or whatever it is. Doesn't matter. But will it matter in a week if you say no right now? Fuck no, it won't matter. But you've got to develop that mindset. You've got to stop looking at the right now and focusing on the long term when you're thinking about the consequences of your actions. Spending money, same thing. How you act in relationships, same thing. All right? So let's just go through this again. We want to pause. We want to separate facts from emotions. We want to ask questions. We want to seek out opposing viewpoints or opposing information, and we want to think long-term instead of letting short-term emotions make our decisions. So I want you to practice one of these steps every day this week. Maybe it's the same one over and over again. Maybe you practice a different step each day. But that is the process by which you can become a better critical thinker and apply critical thinking skills to your everyday life. Pause. Deep breath. Let's get control of our mind again. Separate fact from emotion. Separate evidence from emotion. Separate reason from emotion. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. You want to ask open-ended questions and not yes or no questions so that you can get more information. Seek out opposing viewpoints. Ask yourself, what would someone who doesn't agree with this say or think right now? And then focus on the long-term outcome you want, not the short-term emotion that is triggering your reaction right now. So one of those steps every week. Okay. That's the assignment. Critical thinking does not make you less emotional. It does not mean you don't have emotions. It doesn't mean that you can't act on your emotions. It means that you're going to make your emotions work for you instead of against you, which they do in many instances. So there you go, guys. That's our critical thinking lesson for the day. I hope you found it useful. James puts it up over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We have all our podcast episodes there. Links to all our social media accounts are there. You can subscribe to our newsletter that we publish every weekday on our website as well. And make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast wherever you grab it. We got great guests that come on and talk about how they built great lives because of what they learned from the challenges in their life. We have videos like this one where we give you tips and tools that you can use in your everyday life to build a meaningful, purposeful life that you want. Super important. You don't want to miss any of that great stuff. So make sure you catch our next episode. We'll see you there.